Okay, don't mean to alarm you, but I think it is time for some Metarius data Rius. Okay, there has been enough brain drain. There has been enough siphoning off from this community that finally the poster boys is born. Space Marines are now officially the bottom faction this week. Oh, I don't think we can say this is going to be a one-off. So the first thing to mention is that the win rate itself isn't like completely tragic. Like a 41% win rate in line with a 40% win rate isn't so bad. Like, you know, having, you know, they've still got a 4 in front of their win rate. Right? They're not like a 30% sort of faction or anything here yet. But the problem is that I just don't see that changing in any way, shape or form. Space Marines may have a 41% win rate, and they may even, despite being a bottom faction, they might even have 5 people who manage to go 4-1 with them. So there's still clearly some things kicking about, some people kicking about with them. But this is probably the number I'd be most worried about. Considering that we had 788 players this week, weekend, which is considered the top end of normal, like above 800, and we tend to say it's a busy weekend. And this is 13 technically away from being above 800. Only having 33 players for Marines is quite low. The faction that in theory should be the most popular faction in the game. They are on all of the video games. They're on all of the comms that get pushed out. They're in every fucking box set. It's Marines, man. They're the poster child. They're the fucking Marines. And yet they are down in the shitter, and they're not going to get back up from the shitter. And the fundamental reason why they're down in the shitter is because all of the, for lack of a better term, good, and I'm using that, very generally, that term, but for all of the good players, the cream of the crop, as it were, has been siphoned off to go and play things like Dark Angels. So right now, there's basically no reason to play vanilla Marines, okay? Competitively speaking, you at home might be like, I fucking love Ultramarines. By the way, I'm starting to love Ultramarines. I'm listening to the Euroventress books, and I'm halfway through Nightbringer, and I'm very much enjoying it. But the point is that you might be like, I fucking love Ultramarines. I fucking love Iron Hands, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to take them. Like that. You loving a faction is the most important reason to run them. We know this, okay? But it's important to say it. But competitively, completely taking that emotion, throwing it out, being a goddamn Zuckerberg robot, and just taking like the most logical thing, like just taking that. There's no reason to ever run your Space Marines as Space Marines. Every competitive Space Marine player right now should be running their Space Marines as Dark Angels. If you're taking a generic take all comers Space Marine army with a little bit of Terminators and a little bit of power armor, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, just take them as Dark Angels. If you're taking an assault-based army, you want to be, depending on what, it's going to come down to what units you're going to take, but you're probably going to take Blood Angels or Black Templars or Space Wolves. And it's like that every week. There are always more Dark Angels than there are Space Marines. So the reason for that is there is no reason to take basic Space Marines. You gain no advantage to doing so. Codex Divergent chapters, like Dark Angels, get everything that regular Space Marines get, and then they get their Codex Divergence up on top of that, including unique units, unique rules, abilities, all that kind of stuff. And so what you're finding is the competitive players, like I said before, the good players, who want to run their Ultramarines, but just have more tools in the toolbox, and who aren't so emotionally, shall we say, inflexible, where they're not willing to just say they're Dark Angels. Like, my guys are Dark Angels. You know, they're more tournament focused than sort of faction focused, should we say. Those people they'll happily run their Marines as whatever chapter happens to be the best this time. So the only way GW is going to fix this is by giving something extra to Codex compliant chapters. We need a balanced data slate that comes out and adds an additional rule to basic Marines, to Space Marines, that says you only get this if you're Codex compliant. Moving on. Boss! We's getting shot up! Oh no! Orcs coming in, 42% win rate. I feel kind of bad because I'm wearing my War Tactics t-shirt today. Big thank you to War Tactics for giving me this when I was at Adepticon. It's quite comfy actually. It's quite a high quality t-shirt. If you haven't heard of them, War Tactics, Orc Channel, check them out. Good lads. Good boys, should I say. Hey. I think we can all agree that GW completely and utterly fucked it. Was it Switch? Nice. Completely and utterly fucked it. They went way too hard on orcs. And what's interesting is Games Workshop, up until the orc thing, had been, I know people are going to disagree with me on this, but bear with me, by and large had taken the approach of like incremental changes, incremental nerfs or buffs. So a good example of this is Eldar went through about 7 nerfs, 1 bit at a time, before they've got to where they are now, which is strong yet stable. And when it came to orcs, GW just went with a fucking red line to the codex. Went gone. It was the kind of heavy-handed, knee-jerk reaction that we hadn't seen in 10th edition up until that point. Like, I'm not saying there weren't factions that hadn't suffered. You know, I can tell Al Coffin right now is typing down like, Custodian's got the same thing. Yeah, you did, absolutely. But GW has incrementally started to try and like fix things, right? And I have, you know, I just feel like orcs got hit, proportionally got hit the hardest in the shortest amount of time. And we're seeing the results. And again, even if, I mean, there's clearly something going on, because we are seeing some orc players going 4-1, and they do have a 42% win rate overall. So there are some sort of tasty morsels, but fuck's sake, guys, when your most popular faction is the one from the index, come on, what is the point in releasing a codex if the majority of players are just gonna still keep using it as if it was an index? What is the fucking point? Was Bully Boys overpowered? Yes, obviously it was. It was like a 70% win rate. But Green Tide, look at that, 30% win rate, 2 players. It's completely dead, man. Well, it's like you don't see the Great Hunt. You don't really see Green Tide anymore. You don't see, I can't remember what the other one's called, like Speed Freaks. You never see it anymore. It's just Dread. It's really just Dread, Mob, and Warhorde. And out of the 2 of them, it's pretty much always Warhorde. It's just sad. So orcs are, again, they're not like completely fucking dead because they're still getting a few players turning up and they're still getting a few people going 4-1 with them, okay? But the thing with orcs and Space Marines is it just, there's a bad cloud, there's a bad stink around these factions right now. That stink needs airing out, and we need some Febreze in here, and we need to make them, we need to improve the optics around these things, because they're fucking tragic at the moment. And they are bad, like the factions are bad, and they are going to continue to get worse, and you are going to see the orc win rate and probably the Space win rate fall down to like, if they stay in the 40s, it will be a miracle. I think this will go lower. I think we'll see them fluctuate between the 30s and 40s, so basically high 30% win rate. I think that's where they'll be. And you might see, yeah, and you're going to see the player bases drying up and everything. Last of the bottom 3, we have Chaos Space Marines. Except for Chaos Space Marines aren't in the bottom 3, are they? No. The Chaos Space win rate is actually perfectly fine and totally respectable. And in some places, really powerful. And the results are really coming home. The problem with Chaos Space Marines, well, there are certain attachments like Red Talons and, apologize to myself for this one, Deceptors, which are so unbelievably radically shite, unbelievably cool, unbelievably shite, that it drags the whole win rate down. When looking at the Chaos Space Marine win rate, you basically need to look at the real win rate is Renegade Raiders. Now, this is actually quite a week for Chaos Space Marines. They normally have way more players than that. It's fine, but you know, when player numbers do fluctuate a little bit throughout weeks. But yeah, Chaos Space Marine win rate going down to 37 players is quite low for them. Even so, Renegade Raiders was nearly half of their player base in one faction, and that had a 45% win rate. And 45% win rate for Renegade Raiders puts Chaos Space Marines right in the mid, right in the Goldilocks zone. There are a couple of other more powerful builds that seem to be emerging around Chaos Space Marines. So Renegade Raiders is like the go-to, take all comers, a little bit of everything detachment. You slap that, you take any Chaos Space Marine army, you slap Renegade Raiders on it, you're gonna have a good time. Pact-bound Zealots and Chaos Cult, they're the wild cards. So Pact-bound Zealots, some weeks it's winning tournaments, and then there are some weeks when it's like a 30% win rate. After speaking to some Chaos Space Marine players about this, basically, Pact-bound Zealots is good. You need a little bit of luck and you need a little bit of skill to really make it sing. And walking into it, you're not going to get the results you want. But the potential that it has is big. It's got potential to be really big, but you need to be practiced with it and know what you're doing with it. Chaos Cult, on the other hand, is an absolute fucking meme list and pretty much a stat check. Like, can you kill this? Can you kill my giant horde of cultists? No. Ha! I win. Also, the cultists start off really shit, and then you just layer on like 1,000. Okay, it's like exaggeration. You layer on about half a dozen buffs onto each blob, and suddenly even a basic human is quite a big deal. So yeah, Chaos Cult and Pact-bound Zealots need a little bit more finesse. Renegade Raiders is let's fucking go out for a jolly at the local RTT kind of thing. Red Talons, there was like one player there. So because there was one player, it had technically had a 40% win rate, but yeah, 26% is much more their wheelhouse. Warhammer Siege Heroes, Veterans of the Long War, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, all of this shit, 40%, 40%, 43%, 29%, 20%. There were three Deceptor players. There were three Deceptor players this weekend. Between them, they won 3 games. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say they didn't each win 1 game. Someone probably went home 0-5. And I salute that brave, beautiful bastard. But all of these other win rates basically drag this down, which is why 42% and in the bottom 3 looks really bad for Chaos Space Marines. But the reality is they've got a lot more potential than that. Sure. Leagues of Votann. Now, this is where the numbers get a bit squiffy. Because Leagues of Votann are in 4th and bottom of the table. And yet, we know they're not a bad faction. They've got a 45% win rate. They've got 3 people going 4-1 or better. An average of a 48% win rate. And they've got 24 players. Votann, being a relatively new, relatively niche faction, having 24 players is perfectly in line with what we would expect to see from that faction. And a 45% win rate really is okay. It's in the Goldilocks zone. Actually, Votann are fine. What I think is happening here is more and more factions are kind of settling into that Goldilocks zone. I'm just saying, last week, Votann were up high. This week, Votann are kind of down low, but they're not actually, in neither week, they're not doing badly. Same meta, different day, but with the middle of the pack being so close, they're down here this week, but next week they'll probably be further up. I think last week I was saying Votann could be one to watch, so okay. Next we have Eldari. 45% win rate. Last week they were in the top 8. But Eldar, 45% win rate, 2 out of 32 players going 4-1, and a 48% average. Eldar are doing Eldar things, and it's again a testament to how close these factions are, and how close the average win rates and weekly win rates are, that even a small percentage slip can see what was once the boogeyman of the meta slip down to technically being a bottom 5 faction. Now I know what you're all thinking. We're all hoping Eldar become a bottom faction, because fuck the pointy-eared bastards. Am I right? Oh no. But no, like, on a serious note, Eldar been okay for a little while now. Like, they're not great, not terrible. They're still very strong, but their win rate's been okay for a little while now. They occasionally win a tournament, but most of the time they're 4-1. But no, the big takeaway here is, like I said, a few percentage points can change everywhere. It can change everything, and can change where you are in the pack. Now, there is a couple of other additional things that should be sort of mentioned about this. That means that the fight on the middle tables and the middle of this table is going to be all the more ferocious, because no longer can you go to a tournament, maybe get smashed on your first game, and go down to the bottom tables and kind of, you know, bum around the bottom and the middle tables, confident in the fact that you're going to avoid some of the boogeyman factions. You're going to avoid some of the factions, because now there's so many different armies populating the middle that there's a chance that if you have a bad matchup into a particular faction, then even if that faction is something you could readily come across. So being take all comers is probably more important than ever, which is kind of interesting. And on top of that, so not only are the middle tables going to get potentially quite spicy, not in a bad way, just like there's going to be more variety and all that kind of stuff. Although there might again be some potential knock-on, effects competitive wise of, the middle tables being a little bit more like that. The other thing to mention though is to break out from that middle pack, to be a true top meta army, and not just one that happens to be in the top 8 or top 10 because their win rate managed to go 2% this week, and because of how close all the factions are, that meant you skyrocket into the top 10. Be a true top faction now, you need to be something special. Moving on, so Eldar, it's important to note, they've not got bad numbers at all. It's just everyone's very close together. Similar problems as with Votann, and the Eldar meta hasn't really changed from this week. And then we've got the Astra Militarum. No, we're doing so badly. Oh, we're in the bottom 6. No. Oh wait, we've got a 47% win rate, baby. Yeah. I think this is the second or third week in a row, boys, where we've had that 48% average. Kind of been a little bit higher, and a little bit lower, but we've been on that average high 40s for a while now. Guards grinding, attritionally grinding up the fucking meta. We established one average. Beginning of 10, there's like established a 42% win rate. In place, sir. It's like, okay, next 6 months, establish 45% win rate. Dig it in. Okay, we've got an average of 45% win rate. Okay, now 48%. We're just slowly but surely taking 3% average every 6 months. Boom, baby. Love to see it. Now, the guard win rate, the guard average, and the guard weekly have been so close and have been incrementally going up quite close to each other for quite a while now. And it does show, I think, a long-term maturing and a long-term level of knowledge being built up, which is good. It shows a sustainable improvement. One thing I've said, like guard, certain factions, like You know, like look at this, like Eldar, an average of 48%, and then this week 45%. Same with like Votan. Like you are seeing a lot of like averages go up and down. Like look, these guys are fluctuating quite a lot, like 49% to 45%. I mean, Orcs are fucked with that because they're at the bottom, but there's a lot of factions which are fluctuating like that. Guard, it's just like 47 to 49%. We're in the fucking pocket right now. In that fucking pocket. Yeah. So the average, the guard win rate isn't fluctuating so much. I mean, it does, but generally speaking, the average is grinding up slowly but surely. Really good to see. Guard player numbers very, very healthy, 49. But this is what separates us, if I may. This is what is separating us from our peers, but also down in this bottom half. We had 10 players go 4-1 or better. Eldar 2, Votan 3, Air Space Marines 4. Hey, they fucking won a tournament, don't get me wrong. They did very well, but 4. Orcs 4, Marines 5, Custodies 3, GSC 1, Black Templars 1. In fact, going through all of these factions, there's like what, 1, 2. There are only 2 factions with more people going 4-1 than us, and there's only one other faction that matches us for it. So we're like in the joint top. We're joint third for number of players who are able to go 4-1 with this faction. Guard's in such a healthy place right now, such a solid place. Having such good numbers and such a stable win rate around 50%, and having so many people going 4-1 just shows that our community is going from strength to strength. It's very, very good. Now, there's a, you know, with so many people going 4-1 and this, you know, being like, you know, we should be like an 80% win rate and this being a 47% win rate, it still does show that there's a lot of hard lessons that need to be learned with Guard. Think about it. If 20% of our players here have gone at an 80% win rate this week, and yet we're still down to below 50%. That is showing me that there's a lot of players going 4-1. There's probably a lot of fucking players going 1-4 as well. Remember, Guard is a faction that you have to lose your first 10 games with, and then you start winning games. And it's something that I think is always going to potentially artificially suppress our win rate. But overall, what is the Guard meta? Mech and tanks, boys. Mech and tanks. And Vanquishers. We're seeing more and more people take Vanquishers. Then we have the Adeptus Custodes. Yes, it is the Adeptus Custodes. The golden light, the master of the Master Guitars. The Adeptus Custodes coming in with a 47% win rate, putting them in line with Guard. I actually personally think that Guard is higher than Adeptus Custodes because we have more people going 4-1, despite the fact there's not a huge amount of difference between our player numbers and theirs, and we have a higher average percentage. But clearly these guys are like 47.2 and we're like 47.1%. A little bit higher than us. Now, interestingly, 30 out of 39 players, 36 of them ran Shield Host. There's been one guy who's been running Talons of the Emperor like week in, week out, and he keeps going 4-1 with them. Apparently, there might be something to this whole Talons lark. We have to dig into it. But no, Shield Host is the prevailing thought on Custodes. It's the safety blanket. It's very comfy. It's like Tyranids and Invasion Fleet. It's just what people are used to running, and it's what people just default towards without really thinking. But honestly, Talons of the Emperor has been pulling down some remarkably, anecdotal, but good results. Also, as our Coffin said, apparently Custodes players are latching onto Land Raiders, which makes sense to me because they need good transport and they need long range anti-tank, and Land Raiders fill in both of the balance. Oh my god. Oh my fucking god. They can't keep getting away with it! 6 players. Genestealer Cult got their own codex and they're more dead than Deathwatch. on a busy weekend. Remember, this isn't 6 players and there's like 300 people. This is 6 players and 800 player weekend. 16 tournaments or something like that. Roughly 16. Oh boy. I'm going to call it now. We've been saying GSC are dying for a while. I no longer think GSC are dying. I am confirming it now. I am marking the time. They are dead. Genes of Occult are too expensive to collect because they are a horde army fundamentally. They're too expensive to collect and they're unfun to play. And the Codex did not fix any of the mechanics. The Codex did not address any of the issues. Now we are seeing basically nobody turn up to tournaments with. Sad. I own 3,000 points of GSC. Army Rules killing it. GSC, I'll say it again. Another week of me saying this. I'm fucking sick. My back teeth are saying this. GSC, 20% points cut across the entire army. Give every single unit, including vehicles, deep strike or infiltrate. And then have no respawns. You don't have to give both every unit deep strike and infiltrate. Either give it infiltrate or give it deep strike. 20% point cut across the army. And if they get too powerful, start adding the points back on incrementally. That's the only way. That's the only way. Yeah, deep strike and trucks. Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's fine. 100% I'm fine with that. It's just, right now it's fucked. It's a brutal solution to a brutal problem. And I think it basically hard resets things. But it's the hard reset I think GSC need. So we've got Black Templars! Black Templars have fallen down a little bit this week. So last week, Black Templars were like the undisputed best chapter. But not really. There's something funny going on with Black Templars. And I don't mean in a humorous way. So everything... Black Templars have everything going for them. We've got a 47% win rate. 2 people going 4-1. Someone even won a tournament with them. They've got an average of a 50% win rate. They're right in the pocket. They're right in the gold lock zone. And yet, their player numbers have been consistently dwindling. I'm not entirely certain why. Black Templars are traditionally a very dedicated community, but since the beginning of 10th edition, we've seen quite a stagnant player base, and over the course, it's gone down slowly but surely, the player numbers. I wonder if there are a lot of Black Templar players right now who aren't running like Black Tide, who aren't running one of the traditional Black Templar sort of skew builds, and instead I wonder if you're a Black Templar player that has a mixture of everything, nice take all comers force, if you are going over to Dark Angels. I know, heresy of the highest magnitude, heresy of the highest order, I know. But right now, if you're going to play Take All Comer Space Marines, you might as well play Dark Angels. So I wonder if Black Templars are, because Black Templars, they have a very clearly defined identity, but not necessarily a whole bunch of unique units. I mean, the unique units you get are Crusader squads. That's it. So maybe everyone that is running like Crusader squads is playing Black Templars. But anyone that's running like Take All Comers, Black Armored Marines, are running them as Dark Angels instead. That's I'm going to be honest, I don't have a huge amount of faith in that theory. It's a theory that kind of just occurred to me right now as we're doing the stream, but I thought I'd throw it out there and see what the reaction was. Oh, we get Sword Brethren as well. Yeah, Rex. Okay, Rex. 2 units. Sword Brethren and Crusaders. And I'm lumping Primaris and Firstborn Crusaders together. It's not like Dark Angels where they've got 3 different kinds of fucking unique Terminator, 3 different kind of unique fucking biker, a whole bunch of unique fucking land speeders and flyers and everything. We're not on the same level as that, are we? Are we? Sit the fuck down. Bloody talk of fucking dick. I'm gonna give you a hard time, man. You are right. I had forgotten about Sword Brethren. I'm technically correct. The best time. True. True that. True that. Matthew Burke, probably just the people who played the busted Black Templar Ironstorm list that are leaving now that it's kind of gone. Yeah, it could be that. It could be that. Yeah, the player numbers are what worry me about Black Templars. I mean, it's a busy weekend and they're in the same fucking ballpark as GSC. What the fuck's going on with that? Maybe it's just a quiet week. There were a lot of Black Templar players out in force last week. But it's definitely a figure I want to keep an eye on. And it's interesting because Black Templars, Righteous Crusaders, Black Tide, I think won the biggest event of the weekend, didn't they? It was 100 Primaris Crusaders, 2 squads of 5 scouts, and a bunch of characters. And it just crushed everything in its path. So, yeah, I think Black Templar, maybe that win will rejuvenate the community a little bit. Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, Black Templars, definitely, I have noticed them being on a generally, their win rate and everything has generally been going in the right direction. But it feels like their player numbers have been going in the wrong direction for a little while now. I hope it is a blip, that we will see a return to the glorious Black Tides of old, both player numbers and tabletop wise. Chaos Demons save. Demons just doing demony things. 48% win rate. That's good. 4 people going 4 and 1 or better. That's good. Average of 50%. That's good. 32 players. That's really good. That's really good. There were as many people playing Chaos fucking Demons as there were playing basic Space Marines this week. That is a bit of an indictment, a bit of a damning indictment of the Space Marine situation. There's not a huge amount of change in the Demon meta. We've covered it in previous weeks. Basically, it used to be all about Monster Mash, and now it's all about Khorne Demons. That is still the case. There's no real new things to report about Chaos Demons apart from they are continuing to do a very respectable performance both on win rates, on 4-1 rates, and on player numbers. Demons are very much a faction which is eating good at the moment. There we are. World Eaters are in a similar boat to Chaos Demons. What's interesting is you tend to find that Chaos Demons and World Eaters are fairly close to each other in these tables. World Eaters, 48% win rate. They had 5 people go 4-1. They had a 51% win rate average, which is, they're pretty much in line with that 48% this week. And they had 30 players. I mean, Demons or World Eaters, they seem to be going through a very similar phase at the moment and getting very similar results. I wonder if it is because they are both pretty much dedicated melee factions. You can get guns in World Eaters. You can get pseudo guns in Demons. But by and large, both factions are melee first. And by and large, both factions are performing very, very similarly week in, week out. I suspect what we're seeing here is World Eaters and Chaos Demons can absolutely smash the fuck out of people, but the moment they come across something that either fights first consistently or is mechanized, so they can kill the transport, but then the thing in the transport, which it's not always going to be guards that powers out of transport, could be something a lot a lot more crunchier, a lot more happy to be in close combat, and then they get to charge back and start getting the first stabs in. So I suspect that's why these two factions have always got a pretty decent win rate and pretty good player numbers, because you can be confident that you're going to do well with demons. But maybe that's why they have a little bit of an inconsistent tournament record. Both of these factions have won tournaments before, and World Eaters especially been on a bit of a rampage, and they've won a few events recently, but it's not consistently. It's in like fits and starts. So I think maybe we're seeing a little microcosm, a little pocket of what it means to be a melee first faction with these guys and how that reflects in the world. So up until Dawn has got some interesting insight here. Chaos Demons, Nurgle are more my secondary army. I started back when I was playing Death Guard in 7th, and we got some of them, but are good to mix up with my shooting guard, and I can let a friend play them against me. 10th Demons look not bad, excited to try them more. One glaring thing I noticed is they said we can't be running 20 squads of Plague Bears anymore, only 10. Instead of 3 squads of 20, I now have 6 squads of 10, which I'm not sure is good. You're right there. Yes, the big change for a lot of factions was going, and it seems like a lot of factions sort of cross paths. So a lot of factions like Guard went up to being able to take 20 blob units. A lot of factions like Votan and Demons went down to being only able to take 10-man units. Personally, I think it's wrong that you can't take 20-man demon units, because seeing giant giga blobs of like Plague Bears, like shambling hordes of demons, always felt right. And I think the limitation on squad size has been a big contributing factor to the reason why Greater Demon Monster Mash has been so prevalent in the beginning of 10th edition. I hope that we get big blobs of demons back again. It's just the right way to play. Speaking of Tyranids, these guys are bouncing back a little bit. So Tyranids had a bit of a bad one last week, but I did say last week I think it was a blip. And it turns out it was a blip. And Tyranids are actually back where they belong at about a 48% win rate. Ever since the big changes to Tyranids in the balanced data slate, they've been fluctuating around 48%. I mean, I think their average of 46% feels about right for them. Their average prior to this was like 40, 41%. Now it's 46%, which means they're technically in the Goldilocks zone, but occasionally they fluctuate to like high 40s, and occasionally they fluctuate down to low 40s. I think in comparison to Guard, whereas Guard average is 48%, and sometimes we break into the 50s for a week, and then we go back down to high 40s, I think Tyranids rarely break into 50% win rate. I don't think they've ever really done that. Rather, they've always fluctuated. Now, their average win rate has gone up by a similar amount to Guard, but now they've almost taken our slot in the pecking order. Now, there's a couple of things to mention about Tyranids is 48% win rate is very, very good, very respectable, right in the pocket, right where you want to be. Having 6 players go 4-1 or better is really good, and in fact, actually winning a tournament this weekend is phenomenal, fantastic. It's been a long time since we've seen Tyranids winning tournaments, even if it is sporadically. The big number for me, though, and the number that you may have noticed this week, I've been really focusing on this player number. I think this is the true indicator. With so many factions being close in the running this week, I think the player number count is actually almost the true measure of a faction's success at the moment. I think it's an often overlooked factor, which a lot of analysts and commentators only really look at to try and dismiss random blips when a faction with like 2 players has like an 80% win rate one week. I actually think player numbers in many ways is the most important metric, because it shows the health of a community and it shows the health of a faction, and it shows a faction possibly in ascendancy. If suddenly a lot of people are jumping onto it. So Tyranids having 54 players genuinely like warms my heart, and it takes away a lot of the worries that I had around this factions. Now it's interesting because for a faction that generally I'm going to say this, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but hopefully after I explain a bit more, people will kind of agree with me, will kind of see where I'm coming from. It has always surprised me in some ways how popular Tyranids have been as a community, and how dedicated and loyal Tyranid players be. Now, you might be ready to grab the pitchforks and shout at me for that one, but the reason why it has, on a very shallow surface thought level, always surprised me is because they are essentially an army of nameless, faceless horrors. You can't really have a hero squad of Hormagaunts or Gene Stealers or anything like that, because Tyranid players, even more than Guard players, generally have very extensive, mad collections, and there's hordes and then there's Tyranid hordes, right? Even if it's not like necessarily a horde of little things, you might have like 20 card effects. But the point is, like, Tyranids generally, they're like a horde, volume, yield kind of faction. And and unlike Guard, which you have that connection, like your dudes, and you can even if you've got like dozens of infantry, there's that like one officer, that one chase, maybe it's like one of the old metal sculpts you picked up, but like an eBay lot, that's your favorite one that you always run. Guard have that sort. A lot of factions have that connection with your dudes, but Tyranids don't really have that. But despite this, Tyranids have always been a really, really popular faction. And I think it just comes down to the fact that aliens are cool. And as someone who recently got into Tyranids, I think their general playstyle is like really addictive. And Tyranids share, I think, a lot of the similar vibes to their community to Orc players. They don't really care if they win or lose. They're kind of laissez-faire Tyranid players. Over all of the years of me playing 40k, I don't think I've encountered a bad Tyranid player. I've actually encountered bad Orc players. Crazy. I haven't encountered a bad Tyranid player. Having said all of that, that was just a general off-topic comment on Tyranids. But it's great to see their player numbers were getting a little low when they were in the bad zone a few months ago. It's great to see those player numbers bounce back. I said 2 or 3 weeks ago that we needed to keep an eye on Crusher Stampede. Gentlemen, for the 3rd week in a row, Crusher Stampede has been yielding results. Good results. If we're going to try and have a bit of meta-analysis on this whole thing, one that is specific to Tyranids, I think the age of the Swarm is over. I think the age of the Lictor is over. I think the age of Nidzilla has begun. Happens every goddamn edition. At some point, the big bugs come out to play, and my little guardsmen start getting very, very worried. I actually don't mind that Nidzilla is having a bit of a resurgence, because we've had a lot of because it's been a while since it was good. Now, Nidzilla was hugely popular throughout 9th edition and 8th edition, and we didn't really see a lot of swarms back then. But it's not really been a thing in the start of 10th edition, so it would be cool to see some more. It would be cool to see a bit of resurgence around Nidzilla. I hope it doesn't become dominant, though. Nidzilla, it's a fine balance. Sometimes it can be incredibly oppressive, and sometimes it can be utterly trash. I hope that what we're seeing here is the beginnings of a viable Nidzilla build that might shake the meta up a little bit, but I hope that it doesn't. I hope we're not going back to the days of Daimacarians I know they're legends now, but Daimacarians like dominating left, right, and centre. I hope we're not going to that. There you go, 40-player event, Tyranids. Crusher Stampede, 5-0. Crusher Stampede is on the rise, baby. Invasion Fleet is still the go-to, but Crusher Stampede is on the rise. Vanguard though. Crusher Stampede and Vanguard. Invasion Fleet is still the go-to, still the bread and butter, but Crusher Stampede and Vanguard continue to be new kids on the block that are getting the job done. But Crusher Stampede's really on the rampage. Grey Knights. Fucking hate them. I've tried to be nice. I've tried to be impartial. I've tried to be unbiased. But I just find them so boring. 49% win rate versus an average of 49%. Healthy player numbers. And hey, they're even winning some tournaments, man. Grey Knights are really powerful at the moment. And they have a lot of advantages that they're able to leverage with like big bricks of Terminators, kind of cheesing things like Cull the Horde and stuff like that. But overall, the Grey Knight meta continues to be, if I don't want to engage with it, I won't engage with it, and I'll just teleport around it and score lots of points. Yeah. I think you could... Griffgo's Gaming sort of nails it on the head here. Grey Knights are a mentally taxing army, but they're not a fun army. Some people... I think you can get an immense amount of satisfaction from it. A job well done. But they're definitely not a faction that's particularly fun to play into. And I feel like Grey Knight players... I mean, sometimes you're gonna like clap them cheeks because you just come across someone who you like dunk on. But I feel like a lot of top Grey Knight play is avoidance. And why the fuck are we playing a game if you're just going to avoid me the entire time? There's KG and then there's fucking lobster trap at the bottom of the ocean. And right now I feel like we're more towards the latter. What a turnaround! What a turnaround for the AdMech. They are now a comfortable 50% win rate faction. They're a 50% win rate against an average of 49%. That is very in line. That's a lot better than it was. And they're even getting some people going 4-1, which is kind of cool. Well, one dude did. I guess the only mildly disappointing bit, the only small fly in the ointment, as it were, is it the AdMech win rate, the AdMech community, the AdMech win rate has bounced back. The AdMech player numbers stoically and stubbornly refusing to go up. I wonder if it is because the best way to play is still apparently Skitarii Hunter cohort. Apparently. Radzone Core doing some good stuff this week. I wonder if it's because, as Siriade says, it still costs $1 billion to play AdMech. Yeah. You can... I think AdMech are the first example of GW crossing the line. I've been listening to a lot of Eisenhorn Malleus, so I'm looking for an excuse to use that phrase. I think it's the first example of them crossing the line. Of hitting that point where it doesn't matter how logically you explain that these models are going up in line with inflation and that actually technically they're cheaper. There's just a raw number on the box which people can't come to terms with. And I think AdMech are the first faction that have just hit that. Where people are like, I am not going to spend the X amount of money on this faction because I could just spend X. I could spend half of that on any other faction. Yeah. The points, Serie A, the great thing is the points have gone up recently. A lot. But as Azuth is saying on Twitch, there are a number of AdMech units at or under 1 point per dollar. And some of those are core units, not some showpiece you don't really need. Yeah. It still costs too much. And I think this is being reflected in the fact that AdMech are pulling down great numbers. They're also, I suspect, not only a little expensive to collect, they're probably also a ball ache to paint. I have seen many beautiful AdMech armies. but I have not seen many AdMech armies. They are very, very fiddly, spindly, difficult, and I imagine that no one wants to spend $2,000 on an army and spend a huge amount of time painting them to step back, look at them, and go, oh, this looks like shit. That's the issue with the only way to play AdMech cost effectively is with 3D printing. And as much as we go on about 3D printing on this channel, I suppose AdMech are a very good example of how 3D printing isn't yet cutting into GW maybe as much as we all thought. Because if 3D printing was like super duper commonplace, then AdMech wouldn't be a problem, because everyone would just buy a 3D printer and just print an AdMech army for fuck all. Like you could buy a 3D printer and all of the fancy wash and cure stations, all the resin, and print your entire army for less than it would be to buy an AdMech army. Maybe you're right doing Rats and Trenchcoat. Can't be that bad if you're lazy painted. Just spray silver, throw on a wash, and paint robes. Yeah, maybe. I think it's probably just AdMech are a really cool faction, but maybe they're just not a particularly popular one. Maybe it's that simple. Maybe everyone reads about them, everyone agrees they're really cool. Maybe everyone has designs and at some point hopes and dreams of getting that cool Skitarii Legion. That's that cool AdMech army that they've always read about in the lore or dreamt about, but maybe it's just one of those factions that something else always comes along, and there's always another project that happens to come along that kicks the AdMech back down the project list. Or as Godlike Poet says, it is possible that the damage is done with AdMech, and maybe it's an example of a faction being made pretty bad, and DW has fixed them, but they fixed them at the time when, like I said, well, you know what it could be? It could be AdMech were bad at the beginning of 10th edition. At the beginning of 10th edition is when all of the new players come into the game. GW fixed them a year into 10th edition, but at that point, there's no more new blood coming into the game, or there's it's a slow trickle rather than a big push. GW's fixed them, but everyone who's playing 10th edition and who wants to play 10th edition and who's gonna get into 10th edition is already committed to another faction. And with the way things change so much and so rapidly, for a lot of people, they're locked into one faction these days. Like, they have other like little side armies stuff, but pretty much everyone now mains, and I'm picking generalizations, but a lot of people main one faction. So it's like, okay, well, I've already mained, let's say, Death Guard, for example. I did think about getting to AdMech at one point, but I've only just got around to finishing these Blight Lords. And just as you think about picking up an AdMech box, guess what? It could be that everyone has just got a faction, sticking in the faction, and unless AdMech, and people are only going to jump ship and meta chase for a faction that's guaranteed to be OP as fuck, and also something they can actually get their hands on quickly and paint up quickly. Death Guard, Plague Company, 50% win rate, average of 48%. Very, very good, both of those numbers. 5 people going 4-1, and someone won a tournament with Death Guard. But look at this, 36 players. Loving them Death Guard numbers, boys. Loving them Death Guard numbers. What tournament did they win? Big GT, maybe even bordering on a major right there. Yeah, Death Guard just continuing to be solid. Yeah, Death Guard, they still seem to be doing what they do. Plague Marines, still very efficient infantry, although you only tend to find people taking sort of 10 or 20 of them. Blight Lords, led by a librarian. See very popular at the moment. Not Blight Lords, Death Shroud, led by a Terminator Librarian, is very popular at the moment. And yeah, the last time I played Death Guard was only a few weeks ago, and you had Triple Predator rocking around, supporting a bunch of elite Death Guard infantry. Blood Angels. Now, we're not going to dwell too much on the Blood Angel meta because, as we know, Blood Angels are coming out soon, and their meta is going to change completely and utterly. And what's interesting is I think a lot of people are putting their Blood Angels on the shelves because that feels like a low Blood Angel player number to me. I don't know, maybe I'm over exaggerating, but I really feel like Blood Angels have been getting into like 40s and 50s, like loads and loads of Blood Angels players out there. Dropping down to like 30 players does seem a little low for this faction. And I feel like Blood Angels were really on the ascendancy, and they're still a pretty good faction, but they seem to have dropped off a little bit in terms of popularity and plateaued a little bit in terms of win rate. And it's probably just a whole bunch of people being like, well, there's, you know, I've sort of played enough Blood Angels for now. I'll move on to something else and wait for the codex to come out before I do anything else. It very well may be that a bunch of Blood Angels players, like hardcore Blood Angels players, are using this opportunity rather than, and this is a complete guess by the way, it's just a little thought on and how I've seen people sort of reacting, a bit of anecdotal evidence. It might be there's a whole bunch of Blood Angel people that are getting lots and lots of stuff painted up in preparation for the new codex. If you're a Blood Angel person and you're not entirely certain what the new codex is going to hold, you got a whole bunch of shit in your pile of shame, and you're quite a competitive tournament player, then you've sort of got two choices at this stage. Do you keep playing the old Blood Angel meta, knowing that it's going to be out of date soon, or do you go through your pile of shame and paint up as much as possible from what you think is going to be good, and try and get ahead of the curve so that when the codex drops from day one, you can hit the tournament scene. Dark Angels, where all the Space Marine players really went. 51% win rate is a significant jump up from the average of 46%, but not a surprising one. We have seen Dark Angels go from strength to strength, both in terms of player numbers and win rates, and that's because they're getting the cream of the crop from a lot of other Space Marine chapters right now. Dark Angels in Gladius Task Force are the most powerful way of running your take-all-comers Space Marine army. So Dark Angels are not only benefiting from having a really strong combination, but they're also benefiting from a bit of a phenomenon, a bit of a unique thing that doesn't normally happen. So normally what happens when a bunch of new players jump onto a faction, the win rate goes down. The player number goes up and the win rate goes down for a bit, and then as people start getting experience with that faction, and the win rate starts going up again. With Dark Angels, what I suspect has happened is they've just taken all of the best players from a bunch of other like Space Marine chapters, and so their player number is going up, but those people were already very experienced with running Marines and found the transition to taking Dark Angels just easy, just getting a bunch of extra bonus rules. So why would you play vanilla Space Marines when you can take your exact same army, just say they're Dark Angels, and get the extra Dark Angel stuff? There is no disadvantage. You are sacrificing nothing. You are not getting a restriction on units. You are not getting a restriction on access to certain war gear or anything like that. It's not like back in the day where like you took Black Templars and you missed out on a whole bunch of shit, but then you got Land Raider Crusaders, so that was cool. Or Blood Angels where you got Bile Predators, but you missed out on other stuff. Or Grey Knights where you could get Storm Ravens, but you missed out on something. No, it's not like that anymore. You just get everything you want and more. So Dark Angels right now are seeing a big surge in players because why wouldn't you just take your army and say it's Dark Angels and just reap the rewards? You would. So this is why Dark Angel numbers are shooting through the ceiling. And this is why we're seeing so many people gravitate towards Gladius as well. You've then got Necrons. So Necrons are they're chilling. They're chilling. There's not a huge amount extra to say about Necrons. 51% win rate this week. 50% win rate on average. 16 players going 4-1 is incredible. No one's winning any taunts with them. 50 players is still very, very healthy, very, very popular faction. But pretty much everyone's running Hypercrypt. It seems that Necrons have sort of been fixed. So on the one hand, having 33% of your players going 4-1 might be considered quite spicy. But it also means that a really, really significant portion of their players are getting flattened. Because if you've got 16 people going 4-1, if your army was that good, everyone, your army win would be like 80%. But it turns out that there's Necrons are still doing very well, but clearly there's a lot of people that are getting quite badly filled in. Yeah. I guess a lot of people are going 4-1. A lot of people are going like 2-3 and worse. It's probably balancing out at about 50%. The no tournament win thing though must be frustrating. I guess what in my mind what that shows is the last round of Necron points updates made them slightly too expensive. Not necessarily a bad thing. They needed it. But what I mean is they made them slightly too expensive to get everything they want in a list. So yeah, I think there's a lot of maybe Necrons are just they're very strong, but they're not winning tournaments. I wonder if we'll see the player numbers continue to go down because a lot of people will be satisfied going to a tournament and going positive win-loss, but a lot of people who probably got on the faction initially may start gravitating and moving to something else within the faction, which get them that sweet podium or that sweet tournament. Hypocrite Legion has basically solidified itself as the undisputed master of the Necron dynasties. Awakened Dynasty continues to put in a respectable performance. Panoptic Core is now completely and utterly dead from a perspective of a win rate and from a perspective of player. It now seems that Hypocrite Legion is basically dominant, and the occasion, there's a bit of Awakened Dynasty, but pretty much it's Hypocrite Legion, which is a shame because it's fucking boring and infuriating to play against. It's kind of like playing against Grey Knights. It's not quite the same though. They do actually try and do damage to you. Speaking of Grey Knights, or Knights in general, we've got Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, I like to lump these guys together just to infuriate those two communities because they like to think they're distinctive when actually they're basically just both wanting to play Mech Warrior. They just don't fucking realise it. Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights both had a good week. Imperial Knights 54%. That's pretty big. That's pretty high over their average of 50%. Same for Chaos Knights, 51% over their average of 46%. Both factions seeing a 4 to 5% increase. Both factions seeing a significant portion of people going 4-1. And combined, the two factions had 55 players, although there were more people playing Imperial Knights. That's probably just because there's less people that want to be edgy edgelords. Knights are a gatekeeper army. Knights will happily go 4-1. Knights will happily go 50% week in, week out. But Knights will only occasionally win a tournament. They can win a tournament, but they'll only occasionally do it. They need a good run, good luck, and a hell of a lot of skill. But Knights will always remain with decent player numbers because of how easy they are to generally build up and play. I agree, Godlike Poet. 32 Imperial Knights players is a lot. Yeah, because it's an army which you can basically, if you and an airbrush can get an Imperial Knight army done in a weekend. And also they've just been a tournament army. They were like the gatekeepers before Custodes. They were like the easy, cheap tournament army before Custodes. Everyone and their mum either has a Knights army or knows some of the Knights army that they could borrow. I personally know 2 people who I could ring up tomorrow and say, hey man, can I nip over and borrow your Knight army for the tournament this weekend? And they'd go, yeah, sure, no problem. It's basically Knights. You always, the moment Knights are even semi-viable, their population numbers recover, their ecosystem recovers, because they're just everywhere, fucking everywhere. I'm surprised Imperial Knights haven't got to that stage now where, like, rhinos, people just give them away for free. No one pays for rhinos. Rhinos are free because there's so many of them out there. Holy shit, man. But yeah, Knights, nothing new to report. They're just safely squatting over their traditional hunting ground of Gatekeeper. Tau. So Tau are they the top 5? No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they're the top 8. So Chaos Knights, Tau, and Imperial Knights are in the top 8. Tau with a 53% win rate. I always said if Tau found one good viable build, they would start slaughtering the meta. And then they found 3 viable builds, apparently 4 this week, and they're absolutely fisting the meta, which is not, no one wants that. So Tau, the 53% win rate, 13 out of 43 players going 4-1 or better. It turns out that both Monka, Retaliation Cadre, Tau in general, have achieved the impossible and actually have pretty much all of their detachments as viable. The big news from this week is Kroot. My god, someone won something with Kroot. Okay, to be specific here, one player won 5 games with Kroot Hunting Pack and won a tournament, and the other 2 players won 3 games between them. I wouldn't jump too much on the fat cock of the Ethereals yet. It was a small event, to be fair, but a win's a win. 27 players, 5 rounds. Fair play. Fairly local GT affair. Hey, he won. Overall, though, Tau are looking very, very strong at the moment. We are seeing really, like I said, putting all the memes aside for a moment, overall, Tau are looking real strong at the moment. They are definitely a faction in the ascendancy. They're a really, really solid Form 1 faction. The final piece of the puzzle missing for Tau. They're getting a really high win rate. They're getting a very healthy player count, but we're just not seeing those tournament wins come in. I suspect the dam is going to burst, and I would now put Tau as a meta inheritor. I think it's still cooking. It's still cooking, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing Tau every week get at least 1 tournament win from one of these 4 detachments. I've already talked about Imperial Knights, so we get on to Space Wolves. Literally fuck all new to say about Space Wolves. 54% win rate versus an average of 53% win rate. That's still a problem. 30 players shows good numbers. A really equal split between Stormlands and Champions. Can you see how do you know what the problem with Space Wolves is? Can you see how I'm just like rattling this off and I'm going through it in a very bored manner? It's not the fact that I don't like Space Wolves. I think Space Wolves are cool. I like Vikings in space as much as the next guy. It's just it's the same fucking meta with these guys for 12 months. Change the fucking record. Space Wolves are in dire need of a codex. A dire need of a codex just to make them fucking interesting. Because at the moment, I might literally these meta reviews going forward, I'm just gonna go Space Wolves, same thing, move on. I might as well. There's nothing additional I can add to this. We had a slight blip of interestingness when Champions of Russ became a genuine second viable alternative detachment. But it's the same shit in every single list, every single time. These guys are the most one-dimensional chapter. And I'm saying that as a Black Templar fucking Black Tide fan. Right? So Space Wolves, I'm not shitting on you. I'm not saying that you're not a good faction. You're clearly a good faction. You've clearly been very good for a while now. And you've been, I can't remember a time when you didn't have a 50-something% win rate. Okay, I can't remember that time. It has never been. Before that time, all that existed was the cube. But apart from that, you've always had a 50% win rate, and it's always been fucking Stormwolves, and it's always been fucking Stormlands. And Champions was just like a nice other thing that you guys can do now, but it's the same shit. The one thing I would say is that Champions Rust does seem to win a tournament every month. Stormlands doesn't. So maybe if I was to say something new, it seems Champions of Rust is actually the better attachment now. And it seems slowly but surely we're seeing more people come over to it. And it seems that maybe Stormlands is, it's either going to equalise or Champions of Rust is going to take over. That's the only thing I've got to say. Otherwise, go back and watch any of these meta reports those last 12 months. You'll hear the same thing. Please, GW, make something else. Make something else interesting for Space Wolves. Like, more than just Thunderwolf Cavalry, please. Sisters of Battle. Sisters of Battle. What's changed here? Player numbers gone the wrong way. Last week, we had something like 40 Sisters players or something insane. They were like they were one of the top 5 most played faction. This week, the player numbers have gone down to a really normal, more manageable level. Despite the fact that it's a busy weekend, despite the fact that we've got almost 800 players, it seems like Sisters of Battle, a little bit like AdMech, but not in terms of like the raw numbers. They've got a lot more than AdMech, but it seems like they're sort of stuck in the high 20s for player numbers. Apparently it was a blip last week. Maybe it will be a blip that becomes more and more frequent, and eventually we get lots more Sisters players that permanently stick around. But I guess the big question is going to be, is that going to happen before the Sisters nerfs come in? So Army of Faith this week had 69% win rate. Nice. And then, but against an average of 47%. Hello Mars, 60% against an average of 52%. Pendant Host, 30% against an average of 54%. You're going the wrong way! The only one that's super stable is Bringers the Flame, 55% against an average of 54%. There's a very, 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 very good reason for this. 3 players, 2 players, 20 players. These sample sizes, they're too small. They're small. They're too small. When you've got teeny tiny sample sizes, then you get huge variations and fluctuations in results. While some of this stuff might be interesting to comment on, I think the big thing, it has, as we always say, it has to do it multiple weeks in a row before we start paying attention to it. I know to chat on them, but like with Champions of Rust, I didn't instantly say that this was the way to play. Over the last month, we've seen it become more and more popular and deliver results week in, week out. So now I'm saying Champions of Rust is probably your go-to attachment for Space Wolves. With Sisters of Battle, just because Army of Faith one time gets an amusing win rate, with a couple of people managing to go 4-1 with it out of 3, which is pretty good, doesn't mean I'm suddenly going to say everyone should be running everything into Army of Faith. If we see this occur multiple weeks in a row, it doesn't have to be like as high as 69%, but you know, good win rates, good form 1 rates, multiple weeks in a row, and we start seeing more people jump on it, then I'll say it's a viable alternative to Bringers of the Flame. As it stands, Bringers of the Flame is fucking phenomenal. It's fucking phenomenal, and it is the way to play your Sisters until the data tells us otherwise. Drukhari, Bottom 8 faction. Bottom 8 faction? Yeah, Bottom 8. What do they win, the Drukhari? Okay, no, it wasn't real big. 36 player regular GT had, out of 18 players, 5 of them go 4-1 or better, which is over 25% of the players. That's almost 33% of the players go 4-1. They also won a 36-player GT, and the vast majority of players are still running Sky Splinter Assault, although interestingly, on the very, very rare occasion when someone does take Real Space Raiders, it does always seem to have a win rate that is comparable to Sky Splinter Soul. So maybe Real Space Raiders isn't just for those people that got dropped on the head as children. Maybe it actually is a viable alternative to Sky Splinter Soul, just one that people just aren't that bothered about exploring because Sky Splinter Soul is so much obviously the better choice. I do rip into Art of War a lot regarding their statement around Drukhari, but actually, I've said this once and I'll say it again, I do think a lot of what they said was taken out of context, and I do think that they're not entirely wrong. How do you judge a faction's power and worth, viability? Do you judge it based on its ability to win games, or do you judge it based on its ability to win tournaments? Because it doesn't matter if you go 4-1 every single time. That might make you like, it might individually, each one of those games, you have 80% win rate. But for, I think, a lot of very, very good players, and the Art of War guys are very good players, as much as we poke fun at them a little bit, not too much, it's not really serious beef. As much as we poke fun at them a little bit, they're better players than I am. Sure. If I ever played them, I know they would beat me, and I know I would have to eat. I mean, I would happily eat it. Give me the fucking humble pie, man. I'll happily eat it. You know, I'm not above saying that, okay. But when they said Drukhari are bottom 8 faction, what I suspect they were saying is they're bottom 8 from their perspective because they can't win a super major. Now, Drukhari have won the occasion. I think they've won one super major recently, but Drukhari, they're kind of like a regional power. So who's ever watched like Template Institute videos where they do like, they were like, let's look at the power dynamics of like Star Trek universe, and Federation is like a galactic power, the Cardassians are regional power, and all that kind of stuff, right? They did it with like Stargate as well. Two really good videos of those guys that found it. And I think I would define Drukhari via that metric as a regional power. I think Drukhari absolutely have the capability of dunking on their local meta, and in the hands of a well-skilled pilot with a fully optimized list and who's been honing his craft whilst everyone else was out chasing women, I was mastering the blade. Like that kind of stuff. I think they will win a local GT fairly consistently. I think they have been winning local GTs fairly fucking consistently. I think every week they're winning something. It's not a big thing, but they're winning something. But a local GT to a highly skilled player doesn't mean diddly dick. They judge whether a faction is top 8, bottom 8, based on like how viable it is that they will win a major or a super major. And so a lot of competitive players, I think probably including those like David Gaylard, who in the past, he's not Art of War by the way, he's Fireside Chat, but David Gaylard in the past too actually said Guard were like the top faction, and then he's left the faction now. Even though a lot of Guard players generally are doing much better with Guard, you know, David has said in the past that he now thinks Guard is like trash. And that might be hard for some of us to hear, because we love the faction. It might be hard for some of us to understand, because the win rate's very generally going up in the right direction, and Guard has a lot of people going 4-1. But to a player who's out there to win fucking events, not win fucking games, Guard is not a viable choice. They're a bottom choice, because you can go 4-1, but that's meaningless. You have to go 5-0 and win the tournament for them to consider it a good one. And that is where I suspect this idea that a lot of competitive players, not singling out of War out, a lot of competitive players are coming from when they say Dark Elder or bottom 8 faction. Dark Elder, from the perspective of to win a game, a really top faction, as we can see. But Dark Elder, from the perspective of winning a super major, probably are a bottom 8 faction. So there we go. We've been a little, we had a little bit of fun, and we poked a bit of fun, and we had a little bit of beef. But actually, I think when we were a bit more sensible about it, I think we had a fairly fair analysis there. What do you guys think? Or should I stop being so damn sensible and just start shitting on everyone? sort of last, but definitely not least, we have got Thousand Suns Bottle Magic. So Thousand Suns are probably the real top faction. They're second on this chart, but they're really top faction. Oh man, we have been saying it for a while now. I would say call the black ships, but I think I'd be right at home in the Thousand Suns. I've been saying for about 6 months now that Thousand Suns are the new top faction. A lot of people laughed at me for saying that. But a lot of people also were like, yeah, they're pretty on it. And slowly but surely, they've solidified their position. Thousand Suns aren't always at the top, but they're always in the top 8. And they're often in the top 4. They're just phenomenally powerful. This week, I think, they've really flexed their muscles. 57% win rate is really good, and it's not artificially suppressed. I think that's the important thing to note. It's not artificially suppressed. There's not enough players. With only 27 players, there's not enough there for it to be artificially suppressed. Out of 27 players, 3 of them winning tournaments is fucking huge, man. And 10 of them going like 4-1. I mean, so why are Thousand Suns so good? They're real fast because they get double move. They have an in-game resource that you can't fuck with, like Cabal points. They have an in-game resource which they have to do very little to earn. It's not like Sisters who have to earn Miracle Dice, start burning Miracle Dice. Thousand Suns just get Cabal points and they just spunk them every single round. There's no real way to counter that. You can try and take out the sorcerers, but they're generally very, very well protected. Also, they're not a particularly... they've got some very obvious combos, and also they're not a particularly model-intensive army. The top Thousand Suns army at the moment consists of Magnus, 3 Mutileth Vortex Beasts, a couple of units of Cultists, and about 20 Rubric Marines. Not a big army. You know, roughly 45 infantry and 3 big beasties. That's very, very collectible. I would say that I'd tell you what surprises me, considering how obviously good Thousand Suns have been for how long. I am really surprised this number isn't higher. You know, if Death Guard were this good, we'd see like 40, 50, 60 players. But for some reason, Thousand Suns, who have just been consistently better than Death Guard for months, have never really outstripped them and exceeded them in terms of player numbers. And if anything, I think Death Guard have fairly consistently had more players than them. But Thousands are definitely a very, very good faction, and perhaps we will see more people picking them up as it becomes harder and harder to dispute the fact that they are, right now, probably faction. But actually, they're not. Hold your horses, honey. We have got a nut for probably. We must be getting close to double digits at this point. Deathwatch are top. Now, since the very beginning of 10th edition, Deathwatch have somehow snuck their way up to this. Snuck their way up to this top slot. And it's often because they, like it is this week, it's often because they have quite a small sample size. So as we've seen with small sample sizes, you can get some phenomenally good, you can get these weird spikes from them. But Deathwatch, for the second week in a row, have won a tournament. And for the second week in a row, they've done really, really well. Oh, it's so sad, man. And yeah, I think they won this. I think they won the smallest tournament, both in this weekend and last weekend. But it would be so unfair if the Deathwatch community was finally starting to show what they can do. Maybe people unlike factions that are waiting for a new meta to come along, like Blood Angels, and we're seeing like a bit of a dip for them, maybe because people realize, maybe there's a lot of good players out there who are taking their Deathwatch armies for one last spin before they're basically squatted. Maybe that's why we're seeing the sudden spike in like Deathwatch wins. But it would be so unfair if Deathwatch finally were starting to show what they could do, only to have everything taken away from them. So guys, that's all for now. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, see you guys next time. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.